Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Denver. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Reed Duke, and it is our pleasure to bring you quarterfinal action here, where we've got really kind of the superstar of the tournament, Matt Severa, on the left-hand side, playing against Seth Manfield, who squeaked in 8th place with that last round draw. But Matt Severa had no problem getting into the top 8. He was X-1 going into the last round. Drew there right into first place. Yeah, Matt
Severa wasn't one of our undefeateds overnight, but he ran the tables today and finished up in first seed. Great job to him.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, our view from the booth, Reed. Matt was so far ahead of the field that over the last 2 to 3 rounds, he's almost a foregone conclusion to be in the top 8. So we tend to feature matches that are win-ins for top 8 rather than people that we already know are going to be in top 8. But, I like to take a moment here at the beginning to make sure that we give the props to Matt here for running the tables today in day 2, and you can see why. Nice little start from him here. This has got to look good, from a fellow vehicles player, Mardu player here, Reed.
Definitely.
Toolcraft exemplar smashing for 3.
Definitely. It seems the Mardu vehicles deck has been good to Matt Severa, and his performance will be rewarded not just by our appreciation and acknowledgement, but also getting to be on the play every match that he plays in the top 8.
Right, and what a great situation for the vehicles player here, because that is exactly where you want to be. You have to get the most advantage from this deck being on the play. And on top of it, what a great matchup. The storyline from the other side of the table from Seth Manfield, who, by the way, is down to 11 here on turn 3, is that he is playing a blue-white Panharmonicon deck. And this deck was actually built and tuned specifically to beat the big 3 decks that they expected in the tournament. And I'll tell you what, Mardu Vehicles was not one of those big 3 decks, Reed. And they were hoping to be able to squeak through day 1 without playing against too many red-white based aggro decks, and then get to the meat of the format, which they viewed as black-green Delirium, some combination of red-green and maybe another color, Aetherworks Marvel, and blue-white Flash, which they think this Panharmonicon deck is good against. This is what they don't want to see. And now here we are in the quarterfinals, and Manfield has drawn not only a Mardu Vehicles player, but one of the better ones, Matt Severa.
In a lot of ways, their prediction was right. They did well with this Panharmonicon deck, and Seth Manfield onto the top 8, having had a lot of those matchups and beating up on those decks over the course of the weekend. But yeah, they did perhaps underestimate this Mardu Vehicles deck, which is secret archetype number 4 in our metagame breakdown.
That's right. And Seth has a tall order ahead of him here, as Matt Severa has not slowed down since that quick start. He's already got Seth down to 5. And, this is the turn where Seth Manfield plays Panharmonicon and tries to take care of business going forward, and that ain't going to work this time.
No. Not much of the actual vehicle stuff going on here. It's more of just a very classic creature beatdown draw, but this gets the job done, particularly in a matchup like this.
But Seth does have some plays to get the shields up for him to try to protect that last 5 life, and it's a nice turn for him all told. He's got a Thraben Inspector. That's a little speed bump, but he also has an Eldrazi Displacer, so 2 blockers on the ground to help shore up this deficit.
What Severa really wants here is one of his 4 copies of Unlicensed Disintegration. That would put Seth down to 2, and maybe not on the board, but very close to allow the creatures to deal the last 2 points of damage.
Yeah, also we'll note here that Severa and his Toolcraft exemplar have met the requirement to get to first strike now.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, so that's an attacker that if Seth wants to get rid of it, he'll have to throw 2 creatures in front of it, and that could free up the other creatures to get in for damage, really putting a tough position on Seth. It does feel like Severa is 1 removal spell away from not quite ensuring victory, but pretty close. But then again, Severa's had a really nice draw here, and if he gets to cap it off with a removal spell, it's going to be incredibly difficult, really, for any deck in the format to beat that kind of start.
We're shaping up for an interesting combat step here because Seth has at most 3 blockers on the battlefield. He can't block with all 3 of his creatures and the Smuggler's Copter. However, if Severa points a removal spell at one of the creatures before attacking, then Seth gets a free crew on the copter and will have 3 blockers anyway.
Wow.
So if Matt Severa has an instant speed removal spell, he has to think about what is Seth going to do if I just declare my 4 creatures as attackers. If he's going to crew the copter, I can get him. But if he sees through my plan and blocks, how devastating is that going to be for me?
And then looking at it from the other side of the table, Seth has to decide, well, can I even win this game if I don't crew my copter and block to, eat a creature, trade for a creature, something? And we're going to find out the answer to that right now, because Matt Severa has lined up attack with just Toolcraft Exemplar, which is going to trigger, as well as the Scrap Heap Scrounger, one of the better 2-drops in the format. So let's find out right now. All 4 mana untapped for Matt Severa. He's got all of his colors as well, so this is a big moment in game 1 of the quarters. You got to feel like if Seth activates that Smuggler's Copter that it's just going to go horribly awry for him, right? He's doing it. He's decided he needs to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Does Matt have a way? Because this effectively kills... it looks like Matt said all right.
Another question is, will Seth notice the same thing you noticed a moment ago, that the Toolcraft Exemplar has enough artifacts to have first strike?
Yeah. Those clues providing the other 2 as well as the Scrounger. I would assume that Seth sees it.
We should say, will either player or both players notice that? Because
it is relatively rare, right?
Yeah, and with the new trigger rules, Matt Severa does not have to announce the first strike before attacking, but he does have to be aware of it himself. If he puts his creature in the graveyard, that's too late. It's missed.
Well, you know what? Seth has been permitted to block here. And these blocks look pretty good for him.
Actually, I have to update what I said a second ago. If Severa correctly identifies the Toolcraft Exemplar as being a 3/2, then it will also have first strike automatically.
Because
it's all one trigger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's how I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is good news for Seth Manfield, because there was a lot that could go wrong here. And yeah, everything's just going to trade off. The first strike, not relevant given the double block.
I like that Severa prioritized killing off the creature rather than the Smuggler's Copter, because his goal here should just be to have Seth start the next turn with as few blockers as possible.
Severa left back both of the Thraben Inspectors in that exchange, which left Seth with pretty good blocks, all told.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's a sigh of relief from Seth Manfield. He could have easily found himself dead in that turn, and instead, he got to trade 2 creatures for 2 creatures.
Yeah, that's one where you just hold your breath and hope nothing bad happens to you.
Ooh, well, something bad might happen to Seth here. Look at that. Thalia Heretic Cathar is a real problem for Seth. If his plan is to put more blockers down, that's just not going to work.
Definitely. This is sort of a delayed problem that he knew he was going to have to deal with. He Reflector Maged that Thalia right away, but you're right that it is a huge annoyance when you're trying to establish a board to block your opponent's creatures. So again, we look at a similar situation where Severa's just a few points short of lethal, needs basically 1 relevant interactive card for the game to be over.
I just love that we have a Clown Blazer on the battlefield. Oh, but there it is. Unlicensed Disintegration is flashed by Matt Severa, and that's going to be game 1 going to Matt. Now, I can tell you that we're going to, of course, keep an eye on this match as it continues through, but we do have other matches going on. We've got Jacob Nagro. He's on blue-white flash playing against Ben Hull on red-white aggro, actually a deck that you played in a tournament. And then we've also got Rob Pisano. He's on blue-white flash as well. He's playing against Andrew Wolbers, who's on blue-red Emerge, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, it is blue-red Emerge. He's got a handful of things going on here. He has 4 Fevered Visions in his main deck with quite a lot of burn, but he also has a package of Elder Deep Fiend and Wretched Griff with, get this, Stitchwing Scob, Advanced Stitchwing.
Whoa!
So he is...
all right.
Yeah, he's looking to fill his graveyard, perhaps use Kozilek's Return combined with an Emerge creature to wipe the opponent's board and then win with well, whatever he can put together with a lot of these cool combos he's got going on.
Well, that's
here.
great. Yeah, I see he's got 4 Cathartic Reunion and 2 Tormenting Voice, so he is really prioritizing getting that graveyard full. Our last match is the one that you see on your screen right now. That's Steve Rubin versus Michael Snyder, and you can see the decks that they're playing there, both of them on Aetherworks Marvel decks.
So this is, in many ways, a mirror match, but in some important ways, not a mirror match. We did a deck tech with Steve Rubin to start the weekend, and he named blue as a very important splash color, not just for Whirler Virtuoso in the main, but also for counter spells to get a leg up in the Marvel mirror.
Which is what he finds himself in. Yeah, we have it listed as red-green Aetherworks at the top, but this is actually the new Teamer Aetherworks build that we've seen here in Denver.
But game 1 is more or less a mirror match, so Michael Snyder's really, really, really hoping to win this game so that he only has to win one of the 2 sideboard games once Steve's able to bring in his permission spells. And it looks like he is in pretty good shape here, as he's got an Emrakul on the battlefield. He's currently resolving an Aetherworks Marvel ability, and he's also got a Chandra Torch of Defiance on 7, ready to ultimate. But as we know, when Aetherworks Marvel's in play, absolutely anything can happen. So if Steve is able to have a big enough turn here, the game may not be over.
Let's find out. Okay. Oh, it is a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, too. This is the card he needed. He was on 0 energy there, Reed, but just this one card actually can get him all the way up to the requisite amount. Then what?
So he's got one more ticket left to scratch off. Gabby's analogy.
That's right.
But it's got to be.
Ooh, he's got an Ulamog in his
Emrakul or
hand.
Ulamog.
Yeah, Ulamog would be ideal, I would assume. 2 very problematic permanents. In fact, there's actually 3 problematic permanents that Michael has.
Yep.
But he's got one of those in his hand already. But as we've also seen, Emrakul can do a pretty darn good job of wreaking havoc, especially when your opponent has like a Planeswalker out, that kind of stuff.
All lands.
Okay.
So Steve must have another way to make energy in his hand. Yeah, there's a Servant of Conduit.
Yep.
And here comes the crucial activation.
Okay, this is big time. He needs to hit one of his big Eldrazi here to have a chance to survive, and I don't think he's done it. No, he hit a Chandra, an Ishkana, Harness Lightning.
Okay, well,
Are any of these enough?
if you view the Chandra emblem as effectively lethal, I mean, I've never seen someone survive an opposing Chandra emblem, then Steve, he has too much to deal with on the opposing side of the battlefield.
Okay. So that means that Michael Snyder does, in fact, sneak by that game 1, where you were saying that a lot of what Steve's done to his Teamer Aetherworks deck is geared towards the mirror and will come into effect in the next game after we get sideboards going. So, but still, it's a tall order. He's got to win back-to-back games now. It has nothing to give.
Yeah, I do predict that Steve will have at least a modest advantage in the sideboarded games. But now that Michael has won game 1, this is definitely anybody's match. I wouldn't be surprised by either outcome.
Did you say either outcome?
Wouldn't be surprised by either outcome.
Well, hopefully our main match will start again soon. Once they get going, we'll jump back over and pop in. That was, of course, Matt Severa versus Seth Manfield, with Matt Severa taking a pretty quick game 1 as he had planned.
Man, Marshall, Seth Manfield's tournament has been the stuff of legend here. He showed off with this off-the-wall deck. In the first 12 rounds of the tournament, did not lose a single game. I'm not sure if that's ever even happened in history before.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's
insane.
That was an ongoing storyline. Seth tweeted himself he had not lost a game in the first 12 rounds of the tournament. But then it looked like disaster might actually strike, and he might not make the top 8 with losing the last 3 rounds. Miraculous turn of events in game 2 of his last round allowed the match to go to game 3 and wind up in a draw, and then he squeaked in on tiebreakers in 8th place. You can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so let's jump into one of our other tables now. Jacob Nagro, he's playing against Ben Hull. This is our 4th and 5th seeds going at it.
I was hoping we'd get to tune in on this one. I'm becoming a big fan of Ben Hull. He's a relatively new player on the scene. I hadn't heard of him before Pro Tour Kaladesh, but seems to really have a mastery of this red-white archetype.
I think he's a fan of yours
Standard
as well, by the way, Reed, since you made this deck and he's playing a card-for-card variant or version of it.
Particularly humbling because Ben's results with the deck far exceed my own.
Fair enough.
But he is down a game here. And game 2 seems to be shaping up in an interesting way. Jacob Nagro has had a great start and has neutralized Ben's Smuggler's Copter, but he's playing a white-blue deck and is stuck on 3 planes.
Well, that's good news for Ben Hull, who's down a game already in this quarterfinal match and looking to try to equalize. That said, Jacob's been able to play quite a few things here with his white-bordered planes. Do you like those, Reed?
You know, I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I don't mind them as much as some of my colleagues.
I could just tell you liked them. You've probably got a bunch of those at home.
I've played with them before, sometimes with the excuse of being able to fetch them more easily. If most of your deck is black bordered and just your basics are white bordered, you find them more easily. But really, I just, I like to grind your gears, the old school players.
All right, Jacob's going to attack for 2. He does have a land drop to hit this turn, though, after cracking that clue. Okay, so we'll let this one develop, though. I really want to keep up on our first match, Matt Severa versus Seth Manfield, because they are back underway. The blue-white Panharmonicon deck with a turn 1 play. It's nothing super fancy, but here we go.
Yeah, this game's shaping up much differently already, with Seth being on the play and Severa having no 1-drop.
Right.
Seth's start is reminiscent of the blue-white flash decks, but let's remember that he doesn't have quite the way to push an advantage that the classic blue-white decks have. He does not have Spell Queller in his deck.
Something had to make way for those Panharmonicons,
Exactly.
I suppose. But he's got Spell Queller's big old cousin, Cloud Blazer. All right, so a veteran motorist now for Matt Severa does at least threaten to start attacking at some level. Manfield, though, is going to want to get in there with that Smuggler's Copter, I would assume. The advantage that you gain from that's just so good. Going through your library, getting in for damage.
Yeah, I'm always suspicious, too, when a player plays a land like Westvale Abbey on the second turn. I mean, there's not really a reason why it's a bad play, but people usually just play their islands and plains first. So to see a start like that makes me suspect that Seth could be digging for a 3rd land.
He discards Ether Meltdown.
That's off the sideboard.
That's a cool one.
Also
Man,
off the sideboard.
This has just turned into one of my better draft decks all of a sudden. Filigree Familiar as well, so it's kind of cool. Still operating with no blue mana.
Filigree Familiar, clearly a concession to this type of matchup. The Panharmonicon players saying, well, we just need anything to buy us enough time to get our combos going.
And it looks pretty fine here. Like, look at the 2 creatures on the right-hand side of Matt Severa there. Both of them trade for the Familiar under most circumstances. And that's Seth Manfield up a card and up 2 life, plus whatever the life it prevented from blocking. That's a big exchange for this
Huge.
slow deck. Now we have a face-off between 2 Smuggler's Copters. The problem, of course, from Seth Manfield's perspective is that Matt Severa can just use his Motorist to crew his, and all of a sudden his wins the fight in the air. So Seth isn't going to bother.
So Seth finally found a blue mana, but it's going to enter the battlefield tapped in the form of Evolving Wilds for an island. I'm also curious, though, if Matt Severa's mana is going to give him trouble, because
Yeah.
he has only Ether Hubs as red mana and is going to run out of energy quickly if he actually has to use them for his different colors.
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't assume so just because he played a veteran motorist, he got the scry, but it does actually seem to be starting to become an issue, although the third Ether Hub helps. He's going to use that energy right away. Ooh, for Gideon.
That's strange. I could have sworn I saw planes in his hand.
Well, that'd be strange, especially crimped on red mana.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm mistaken.
So Seth is going to go get that island. And like you said at the onset here, Reed, this game playing out way differently than the first one. Now all of a sudden, Matt Severa looks like the player who's taking a little bit more of a controlled stance here, as he's the one who has a powerful planeswalker that he'd like to protect and start to leverage.
And this is a subtlety that I think makes the vehicles deck a lot better than some similar aggro decks have been recently. The ability that when you need to, you can sit back on your planeswalkers, your sources of card advantage, and ways to fix your draws, your needle spires as well. This deck just has so many qualities built into it that allow it to play a long game and still contend with a more controlling opponent even this deep into the game.
Slow clap for Cloud Blazer. Well done, Seth Manfield. I love it, buddy. Though, while that might propel him better into the late game, and certainly Seth Manfield is going to have a much, much stronger late game than Matt Severa, even with, you know, a good draw here from Severa sort of populating the board with powerful creatures. You know, he doesn't have the ability to really get in at Gideon still. And I'm wondering, where does this game go from here? As, you know, Gideon can generate advantage in multiple different ways, either by attacking or by making 2/2s. When does Matt actually start attacking?
So a play pattern that I usually go to in a board state like this is I try to attack once with the Gideon to give myself an option to make an emblem at a later time. Now, Seth Manfield's at 24 life with blockers. Matt Severa is not close to killing him by any stretch of the imagination. But also, a 2/2 ground creature is not particularly valuable. So the 1 point of loyalty giving you additional options next turn or a few turns down the road, I think, is what I would go for here. Matt seems to agree.
Okay.
And you said it, Matt just really placing a huge value on the effectively 4/4 Smuggler's Copter holding off Seth's Air Force.
Seth's looking at his life total. Like, I can certainly give up the 5 here. Maybe he wants to cash in the Filigree Familiar, though it is doing a pretty good job of holding back the Toolcraft Exemplar, at least as it sits. He took it.
We could have one more interesting development brewing here in that Westvale Abbey on Seth Manfield's side of the board.
That's interesting.
Matt Severa has set up his mana to play the full 4 copies of Unlicensed Disintegration, and they've been great for him all weekend. However, that leaves him with very few removal spells that can take Ormondal Profane Prince off the battlefield.
Stasis Snare being the normal go-to.
Stasis Snare is the normal go-to, but Matt Severa has 0 copies.
Yeah, it's
anywhere.
pretty tough to cast a red-black spell when you're also trying to cast double white spells with consistency. So what does he have answers-wise? By the way, Fragmentize just took down Matt Severa's Smuggler's Copter.
Okay. Severa has 2 Declaration in Stone in the sideboard, but he would have had to foresee a situation like this to even have brought it in, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if it's still sitting there in his sideboard.
Wow, that was a big swing there for Manfield. The only potential flying blocker was that Smuggler's Copter, and that means that while Seth has to put most of the shields down for the turn, he got in for 5. The Cloud Blazer and the Smuggler's Copter both hit Gideon, and Gideon's down. Wow, this is a big turn for Seth. Look at this. A Reflector Mage kills the leftover knight, and it's as if Gideon was never here.
Now it's just Cloud Blazer.
As it should be.
Cloud Blazer and his legacy of 2 life and 2 cards.
Right.
Maybe her legacy, I don't know.
I think her, yeah. In the meantime, Matt says, all right, gloves are off. You want to fight? Let's fight. And Manfield signaling that he's going to block here, I think, by sacrificing this Evolving Wilds before.
Yeah, this is the type of detail that a player of Seth's caliber is really sharp with. If he knows he's going to draw a card off Filigree, Familiar Dying, and he knows he doesn't need lands anymore, he's going to thin his deck before the draw rather than at the end of the turn. Very small details, but it's the small details that add up in Magic.
Especially when you're playing two players of this caliber, two full-on professional Magic players. Seth's a former world champion, Matt Severa, multiple GP champ, also, tests with one of the better teams out there. These guys certainly know what they're doing. So, how does Seth want to block?
Yeah, the biggest question is what's more valuable between Toolcraft Exemplar and Veteran Motorist. I predict that Seth will conclude Veteran Motorist is more valuable just because in the presence of a vehicle, it's more valuable. If it's blocking, it's more valuable. And Toolcraft Exemplar, you could have the hope of eliminating all of Severa's artifacts. Nope, but I'm mistaken here. It looks like Seth's just going to block the two Toolcrafts.
The argument for the Toolcraft Exemplars is that if Severa somehow comes up with another 2 artifacts, they become much more difficult to block, though it does feel unlikely that Severa will do that, given that he hasn't yet.
Another important factor that Seth could be valuing is that Veteran Motorist can trade with Thraben Inspector can trade with Veteran Motorist.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate deciding point there, where the Exemplars, at least for the near future, are going to end up being 2 toughness attackers rather than 1. Seth's down a game. Got kind of ran over in the first game, but I got to say I like the way that things have gone. If I'm sitting in Seth's seat here, it's not locked up by any stretch, but things are looking pretty good for him, I think.
I think so too. His life total's high. He's up on cards. He has the hope of producing a threat that Matt Severa's whole deck basically can't answer if he's able to transform Westvale Abbey.
Oh. Here's an Eldrazi Displacer read. Somebody with not a lot of imagination might think that blinking a Thraben Inspector could be sweet, but take a look at that Cloud Blazer. Not long for this world, as it turns out.
I think Matt Severa is responding here.
Correct.
Just to make sure the damage cannot be too great.
Yeah, I think that Seth crewed the Smuggler's Copter in response just because. But yes, that was all with the Eldrazi Displacer on the stack, because if Matt Severa lets it resolve, the way Magic works is that Seth gets priority, and he can just activate whenever he wants. So Matt then has to play the game in this awkward place where he wants to kill the Cloud Blazer, but he can just sit there and hold it as long as Seth doesn't activate it. And he wanted to take matters into his own hands, use up his mana, and also just killing the Cloud Blazer makes sense.
Right. Sometimes very controlling decks are happy to play a cat and mouse game like that, but the Mardu Vehicles deck does not have the luxury of holding up 3 mana for the rest of the game.
Right. And of course, we've really gotten to the point in the game. What else does Seth have? A Reflector Mage on top of all of this, huh? So I guess he's just going to send back the Scrounger. Looks like he's actually thinking about it. You wouldn't want to let your opponent have that Scry 2 again, right? At this stage in the game?
Right, although Matt Severa is depleted of energy and because of that doesn't have any red mana on the battlefield currently.
I see. So Seth was wondering, well, can I just strand this thing in his hand? But I think he wisely thought, look, this game's going to last at least a few more turns, and it could come back and make a big difference, so I'll just play it safe. Yeah, this is interesting. Matt has still yet to draw an actual red mana source. He's churned through the 3 energy he got from the Ether Hub, but he's now out. Thalia has now joined the team for Severa as well. But again, we're at the point of the game now, Reed, where top decks favor Seth Manfield in a pretty major way.
Yeah, in a major way. Even without setting up his Panharmonicon combos, his deck is full of 5 mana cards that really devastate Matt Severa. Another Cloud Blazer in an even game state like this is devastating. That's not even to mention the way these cards combine with Eldrazi Displacer.
No Panharmonicon, so we won't be seeing that infinite combo here, but still, the Drowner of Hope is probably just good enough to lock up the game, and in fact has done so. I do have a question for you here, Reed. Do you think Seth took the Panharmonicons out? We did not see one. He looted through a big chunk of his deck. He's playing against an aggressive deck where Panharmonicon is really a liability in many ways. Do you think he can afford to take those out?
Good question. My answer is yes. I think if I had to make a prediction, I would say that Seth probably took all the Panharmonicons out of his deck. He wants to have as many creatures as possible. He doesn't want to take a turn off, as you mentioned. Plus, he needs to be worried about Matt Severa bringing in his own anti-artifact measures and ruining all his hard work. So I think, yeah, Seth is trying to play a more fair game here and just use his Cloud Blazers and Sky Sovereigns to pull ahead in the late game, which worked that time.
It did. Michael Snyder versus Steve Rubin. We're still in game 2 here. We saw Michael Snyder take game 1 in this not quite mirror match.
Looks like both players have sideboarded in Tireless Tracker, aiming to play a more grindy, fair game if need be.
Right. Unfortunately for Michael, his is now in the graveyard, where Steve's is still on the battlefield with a full 3+1/+1 counters on it, making it quite difficult for Michael to deal with. You know, the red burn spells don't usually reach quite that high, though I guess Harness Lightning could get the job done. He's got 5 energy here.
And here's the strength of Steve having access to blue. It just makes his deck more well-rounded, more equipped to answer a wide variety of situations. So when he is able to get ahead on cards like this with a Tireless Tracker and the luxury to crack a couple of clues, now he has counter spells to make sure that Michael Snyder maybe can't resolve an Aetherworks Marvel or can't hardcast an Eldrazi as easily. All that said, it's possible that Steve has not been fortunate enough to find a counterspell yet. I can't see his hands.
Yeah, I got a view of a couple of the cards, but I don't think he's got a counterspell in his hand either. It looks like it's like Emrakul, a couple of lands. Maybe a bunch of lands, actually, Reed. Like, it might be Emrakul, lands, and a Servant of the Conduit, something like that. Not a great hand for Rubin, though. He does have that Vessel out.
If the shields are down, Michael Snyder's going to be able to at least try for an activation of Aetherworks Marvel this turn.
He's at 5 life. It's go time for Mike Snyder.
You're right, it is go time.
Here we go.
It's not like he has a discard spell to ever be able to clear the way. It's not going to get better than this.
Ah, okay. Well, how about Ishkanah?
That is safer. He knows that it can neither be countered by negate nor ceremonious rejection. So he wants to buy himself time and make sure that he has, as long as he needs to cast the cards in his hand.
Should buy him quite a bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, though, it does give Steve Rubin more time to start sacrificing those clues that he's got, or the Vessel of Nascency this time. Ooh, there's an Aetherworks Marvel.
He finds a Marvel of his own, and we're going to see a very, very cool interaction of the post-sideboarded Marvel deck here, which is that every time you sacrifice a clue with the Marvel in play, boom, 1 energy.
That's cute. Steve Rubin currently on 2 energy, so it doesn't have the ability to activate the Marvel at least immediately. He has an Ether Hub in his hand to put him to 3. Can't quite sacrifice 2 clues without losing additional energy, though, thanks to the Servant of the Conduit.
He must be quite close to hardcasting Emrakul. His graveyard looks pretty full. Artifact, enchantment, sorcery, creature,
Good
land.
call, Reed. I'll stop your counting right there because, bang, there's Emrakul on the battlefield. The good old-fashioned way. You know, sometimes you don't need to
and if you ask me, this is part of the downside of Snyder not going for his best possible play last turn, is that he might no longer have the chance.
Yeah. He would have hit.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it really Just saying. So Steve Rubin should be able to wreak some real havoc here with Snyder's hand and board, right?
Yeah, one priority should be wasting energy. He can spend 1 energy each on Servant of the Conduit and the 2 Ether Hubs. That will put Snyder in a position where he can't play and activate the Marvel. Although with Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, maybe Steve needs to take a whole different approach. He could play the Marvel and activate it himself, which would waste energy and potentially find something like a removal spell that can devastate Snyder even more.
Another subtle but important factor here is you saw that Steve Rubin just got to play an Evolving Wilds. He also failed to find, which is nice, but more importantly, he got to look through Michael Snyder's post-boarded deck. He knows now what Michael's game plan is and the things that if he wants to make any adjustments.
Yeah, no secrets anymore.
Right. So we see Spider and Servant foolishly enter the red zone under Steve's watchful eye. Now what?
Well, it's tricky because it would be nice to play the Marvel and activate it, wasting the 6 energy, seeing what you can hit. But then there's a Marvel in play for when Michael untaps for his turn. So you don't really want to invest the 4 mana for him.
Right. Also, like you mentioned, the Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot really throwing it represents a free spin on the Marvel for Michael.
Exactly. So this is a very tricky turn for Steve to navigate because there doesn't look to be an obvious way to make sure that Michael doesn't have a good turn when he untaps.
He decided, the best thing for me to do is not do anything.
Yeah, let me not cause any more harm than I need to.
That's not good news for Rubin, though. That means that Michael does get to play his Aetherworks Marvel, and he will get to take a spin. There's the Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, putting him up to 8 energy, and this worked out okay for Michael. All told, he lost 2 creatures and a land, but
if he hits either Eldrazi here, it's going to be big for him. It's going to be a great situation.
Ulamog to kill the opposing 2 huge creatures. Oh, man. Let's just see what he hits here.
He didn't hit an Eldrazi.
Okay. We'll go into double screen mode here because that is our first match down in the lower right. I just want to see what Michael, when Michael passes a turn here, what things look like. And then we're going to go full screen on the match below because I do want to make sure that we keep up with it. It can be over pretty quickly given that Matt Severa's on the play. But if you are prioritizing that one, lower right part of your screen will be down there in just a moment. In the meantime, Snyder looks like he's in a really bad position here. He's at 8 life.
He had a glimmer of hope if he had hit well on this Marvel activation, but this could very well be the only activation he's going to get in this game.
Yeah, okay, why don't we jump over? It looks like it was a Servant of the Conduit that he ended up. He's going to try to build back up for another spin if he can survive.
Yeah, he is dead on board, though, if the life totals are correct there.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get back on this. Let's jump in and see what we're looking at here. So Matt Severa, again, he was on the play. Looks like he went Toolcraft Exemplar.
The perfect start.
Right into the Smuggler's Copter, and I believe that we're on his turn 3 now. Seth Manfield, on his turn 1, played a Thraben Inspector and then a land go situation.
So what could Seth be representing here? He does have 2 Ether Meltdowns and 1 Immolating Glare off his sideboard, also Negate. So those are things that he could be spending his 2 mana on. He might just have nothing and want to crack a clue.
Right. In the meantime, Severa's going to resolve this Scry.
And this is actually my favorite 1, 2, 3 in the vehicles deck. You get to scry, set up the top of your library, and draw into the card that you scryed into. So if you're looking for, say, a land that produces black mana, you have a great chance of finding it here.
Oh, I see. He can now activate the Smuggler's Copter, get in for 4 in the air, 3 on the ground, and draw the card that he wanted, which, as it turns out, was a slightly better land than the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that you and I had a chat with Emerson actually in the car. You can see that he's now played a blue mana source here.
Right. We call the deck Mardu because it's only Mardu colored cards in the main deck, but Matt Severa has elected to play blue lands and 4 Ceremonious Rejections in his sideboard. That's a concession to Aetherworks Marvel being such a popular dominant strategy, but it's not out of the question that he might have sideboarded them in against Seth, especially if he has not come to the same conclusion that you and I did about Seth possibly boarding out Panharmonicon.
It also says colorless spell, right?
Counter-target colorless spell, yes.
So there's other targets for Seth, like
Smuggler's Copter, Filigree Familiar, Sky Sovereign, which is a big one. That could be a game-swinging play if he ever counters a Sky Sovereign. So yeah, certainly within the realm of possibility. To be honest with you, this game looks fairly lopsided. It looks like Matt Severa was on the play with a near-perfect hand, and Seth Manfield has had an average or below average hand and is not putting up much of a fight.
Not really. He's down to 3, and Matt Severa is on the verge of making it to the semifinals with a crushing Game 3 performance here.
Matt Severa has not lost today. Came in at 8-1, went undefeated, comfortably drew into the top 8, and now he's in position to take down one of the best players in the world and advance to the semifinals.
And he just did it right there. Seth Manfield's going to have to settle for just another top 8 finish on his resume. He's got a bunch of them.
Top 8.
Yeah, and Matt Severa moving on to our semifinal. He is going to await the winner of Jacob Nagro and Ben Hull. They're the ones who are fighting it out for that seat across from Matt. So congratulations to him. And, of course, to Seth Manfield as well.
So Steve Rubin did win that game, presumably just attacked for the win to finish off the last few points of life on Michael Snyder's side. And now they start Game 3. Steve Rubin's advantage being a handful of counter spells in his sideboard. Michael Snyder's advantage being getting to go first.
And Michael just can't do anything about those counters, right? Like, he can't get them out of his hand. He doesn't have things that interact with them. He's just at the mercy of those cards.
Right. There's not much he can do to really set up resolving his spells, but the best way for him to approach the matchup is to be prepared with cards like Tireless Tracker to punish Steve Rubin if he wants to play so slowly that he's keeping mana open, holding up these narrow sideboard cards, and he could just run away with the game with normal creatures. That's not out of the question.
We'll see if we've got keepers for our 2 players here. Michael will be on the play.
You know, it seems like the counterspells are the end-all, be-all in a matchup like this. But the tricky thing is that Steve Rubin's putting himself in a position where his deck needs more and more of these moving parts all at the same time in order to function. Remember, he's still going for Aetherworks Marvel, so he still needs to have lands, Marvel, enough energy to use it. He needs to have enough good hits in his deck to make sure it's an effective card. And on top of that, he also needs to be holding up blue mana and a counterspell. It's a tall order. Yes, it's an advantage, but there's still a lot that needs to go right for him to really have checkmate, so to speak.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think that looking at that hand that he had as an opener, he thought about it for quite a while, and I think he had a similar thing to what you were describing, where like he had some castable spells. Maybe he was missing blue mana for the Ceremonious Rejection in his hand, but he just decided it was going to be a little too clunky given the pieces that he had, and he's going to mulligan. All right, let's see if Steve's got a keepable 6. He does. That's good for us from a viewpoint perspective because I want to see that.
Okay, so Steve Rubin on the mulligan, on the draw. Starts with In Tune with the Ether. And Michael Snyder has Vessel of Nascency. So both decks having turn 1 that they want to have, setting up for later.
Woodweaver's Puzzle not particularly threatening to Steve Rubin at this point.
No, although it is a part of the perfect draw of the Marvel deck, which is simply turn 2 Puzzle Knot, turn 3 Crack It, turn 4 Marvel.
Rubin's got a really nice draw here as well. He's going to have a turn 3 Chandra
That is really nice.
if he's uninterrupted.
However, that puts him in a position where he would have to tap out at the crucial moment, perhaps allowing Michael to play and activate a Marvel all on the same turn.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if Steve has some of his blue counterspells in hand, because if that's the case, yeah, I would expect him to not play Chandra here. Oh, especially because I saw a Vessel of Nascency in his hand as well. So if he does have one, he's got other places to put his mana while still keeping the shields up, as it were.
Even if he doesn't have one, he might value the ability to bluff. We saw in the previous game, Michael Snyder was unwilling to go for the Marvel into 2 open mana, which is a reasonable decision and makes a lot of sense. But Steve Rubin has the option to try to use that to his advantage. All things considered, I would just play my Planeswalker.
You would.
It's something interesting to think about, but in Magic, there's a real risk of overthinking yourself and getting too fancy. A lot of times it's right to play your cards.
Well, here we go. Playing your cards is exactly what Snyder's doing. The shields were down for Rubin, and he's going to run out that Aetherworks Marvel right here on turn 4.
Could the game effectively be over?
It could
here?
be. This is huge for Snyder and his chances to make it to the semis. Does he hit one of the big Eldrazi? He hasn't been running super hot with this. He missed.
Paul Rietzel says they should write a rule that you have to say right away whether you hit an Eldrazi or not. You can take your time and think about your decision, but you got to tell them whether it's going to be an Eldrazi.
Yeah, because he could, from Rubin's standpoint, he could be thinking about which Eldrazi to play, though that is not the case.
What are my targets going to be for Ulamog's Exile ability?
Right. What would I do with your turn if it was... Yeah, that's not the case, though. So this is a big turn of events, as all he came up with was a Tireless Tracker. And I'll tell you what, Chandra is sitting there just ready to pick that off if that's what Steve wants to do. No clues.
Yep.
No damage. Nothing. And Michael Snyder is now completely out of energy.
But let's not forget that he does still have the Marvel in play, which this is the key card in the matchup. It's the best card in the deck. One of the most powerful cards in Standard. Did Snyder forget his 1 energy trigger from the Tireless Tracker dying?
He certainly did.
Don't know exactly how the numbers are going to line up, but that could easily be costly.
Oh, that could be very costly. And I think Rubin forgot his Ether Hub trigger there, too.
Well, one good turn deserves another.
I guess fair is fair. Though that energy looks a lot more important to Michael Snyder right now because he's the one with the Marvel on the battlefield. So we'll track this.
Right. This one he gets.
He get that one.
So he is close. I don't think there's any single card that's going to give him enough energy here.
There goes 2 of his big targets heading to the graveyard.
Right, he can't be thrilled about that. Man, it's so wild, Marshall, that these games can just come down to what is in the top 6 cards of your library at the crucial moment.
And I'll tell you what, you start looking at the cards that aren't in there anymore. There goes an Ulamog, there goes an Emrakul, and Mike also has another Emrakul in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't play that many, right? What do they play, 6 targets?
Well, Michael's list is a little heavier than most. He has 5 in the main deck with an additional Ulamog in the sideboard. So he's still got some good hits in there. I wouldn't count him out.
Okay. So Tireless Tracker for Rubin is going to have to do a lot of work for him here.
Yeah. Schneider has 4 energy here. If he had a 5th, he could chump block with the Servant of the Conduit to get up to 6 energy and activate. But as it is, he's going to have to wait till next turn, no matter what, to activate his Marvel. Rubin untapping with a wide variety of options, and I think he drew his own copy of Aetherworks Marvel here.
Okay.
He has access to as much as 8 mana if he's willing to use both his Servant and his Chandra plus ability.
He's going to plus Chandra, but not for the mana. He
Yeah,
reveals
I'm not
Ulamog.
sure I love that play. I think it might be just as valuable to use the mana and just crack an extra clue.
It is very much an energy race at this point. Steve does not have a lot of time before Michael will inevitably find a way to spin that Aetherworks Marvel again. He dodged a bullet with the first one, but it's not necessarily going to be the case the next time.
Panner 13 that life totals are being reduced by. But you never know when the game could play out in a strange way, so you definitely do not want to miss your attacks when you have them available.
Man, that is brutal. He did attack, and this is that little one missed energy maybe catching up to Michael there, because maybe Steve doesn't attack if he's got the next energy, or maybe Mike just goes, okay, sure, chump block, and then like you said, gets to spin Marvel again. And there we go. He would have been at 6.
It does look like Schneider's gonna have a big turn here.
Is this Emrakul time? What is going on? No, it's World Breaker.
Oh, okay.
World Breaker to take out the opposing Aetherworks Marvel. That's a big swing. And Snyder's still with 4 energy.
Meaning there are a lot of live draws.
Yes. Also, with the World Breaker out, isn't he kind of ahead now? At least stable, right? Like he's not taking damage.
No, 7 toughness is very difficult for the red removal or a tireless tracker to overcome. So yeah, he's stabilized his life total. Steve still has. He's certainly winning on the card advantage axis, having both the Planeswalker and the tireless tracker in play. But that's just one of many dimensions of this game, and Steve's not ahead in all of them. It's still very possible for Michael to be able to leverage his main advantage, which is simply the presence of Aetherworks Marvel on his side of the battlefield, into a win.
Okay, well, he ended up hitting an attune with Ether off of Chandra. He's going to cast it.
So I think he didn't adjust from actually casting a tune with Ether.
Right.
That's not a trigger. That's just part of the spell. That should happen automatically.
Yep. And now he's going to use one of them for the Ether Hub to cast another tireless tracker. And that is his game plan here for sure. He's got a land drop to follow, which is going to bring him up to 3 clues here, Reed. And like you said, really significantly ahead on the card advantage situation. But man, that Aetherworks Marvel for Michael Snyder is just looming over this battlefield. That could just unravel everything that Steve's done.
I would really like to see Rubin utilize the mana ability of Chandra a little bit more, especially now having 2 tireless trackers on the battlefield. Whether he reveals his top card or whether he cracks a clue, he sees 1 card deeper in his library anyway, but gives him better chance of hitting land drops, makes his tireless trackers bigger. I think it's just a slightly more valuable play to make.
Okay, another Aetherworks Marvel goes on the stack, but Rubin's going to snap that off with a negate.
Man, so funny. Negate, we talked about being Rubin's trump card. He built his deck in order to have negate in this matchup, and he's countering a card whose only function right now is to produce 2 energy.
To make 2 energy. Unreal.
And it's definitely the right play. It's definitely the right play.
Yeah. Back to Steve Rubin.
Deep in the tank, head in hands. I would love to know what Michael Schneider's delirium count is because he does have Emrakul in his hand, and he's getting to quite a lot of mana here.
Yeah, he is getting close. Remember, he has that Servant of the Conduit, too. He's got 8 mana available.
He had cracked a Vessel, so certainly artifact, enchantment, creature.
Yeah, as far as card advantage goes, Steve Rubin is now just way, way ahead. And Evolving Wilds is going to get him 4 more clues to put him up to 6.
Another advantage of cracking clues versus revealing cards with Chandra is the ability to find counterspells. And at this point, if Emrakul is going to be online and if Aetherworks Marvel is going to be able to be activated, the best thing you could do is be ready with Ceremonious Rejection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those don't do much good if Chandra reveals them from her other +1 ability. And here he goes. Lots of action every time he cracks a clue. He's drawing a card, getting a bunch of counters. There we go.
I love it.
Now he's going to use that mana. And this was prompted by the fact that he wants to keep that blue mana available. I believe he found another Aetherworks Marvel there. If I saw that correctly, I'll try to get a better view. But now he's left that blue mana.
Mm-hmm. He's short of casting the Marvel this turn because remember he did start the turn with Evolving Wilds.
Mm-hmm.
Can't play an additional land.
Yeah, it was a Marvel. He's got Servant of the Conduit as well. Which can be a little bit more precarious source of blue mana, but it does do the job. And now is this combat math that Steve's doing? No, he's just going to pass.
Yeah, he doesn't want to have his tracker double blocked by World Breaker and Servant of the Conduit.
Okay. Can Michael find 2 energy somewhere? He's been stuck on 4.
I think he drew a tune with Ether.
Whew. That would do it.
Bit of a tell here, counting the mana.
Yeah, I don't know how much it matters. But if I'm Steve Rubin, I'm like, oh no. Now I know what's happening.
Oh.
It was Nissa.
Yeah, I missaw the card in part because that's not one I'm used to seeing.
That's right. This is a card that we actually talked about yesterday quite a bit, didn't we?
So this is Nissa Vital Force. This is the one that you actually can open in booster packs of Kaladesh. Yeah. Another one that we had focused on is the 6-mana Nissa, whose name escapes me, but that was in one of the standard showdown decks.
Yeah, that's Nature's Artisan. This one is Vital Force, though. Yeah, a card that seems really powerful. Hasn't seen a ton of play.
I love this card. I pretty much put 1 or 2 in the sideboard of all my green decks in this format. I think it's a very, very good underappreciated Planeswalker.
All right, well, here we go. That was enough to get Aetherworks Marvel going. And there, I saw an Emrakul.
Yeah, so what Michael did there was he used the -3 of Nissa return target permanent card.
Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand.
And he returned Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, giving him enough to activate the Marvel and find Emrakul.
This could easily set the stage for him to be right into the semifinals as Steve Rubin did not have the answers he needed at the right time for either the Aetherworks Marvel nor the Emrakul that he's now going to face down. And Steve's starting to map out the bad news for himself here. Well, how does this end up going? Well, I lose this.
Yeah,
I lose
Marshall,
this.
Steve's got a lot going on, but a lot of it is going to be able to be destroyed when Schneider takes his turn.
Yeah, sitting behind a World Breaker and an Emrakul, how in the world? Steve's just going to lose everything here. Well, looks like he's got something lined up. We'll let Steve do his counting. Vessel of Nascency is going to hit the graveyard for him. What's he looking for here?
This is a good one to do at the end of the turn because you know it's just going to get wasted if you let Michael do it for you.
I see. He looks like there's a World Breaker of his own, as well as a couple of lands.
Oh, but this is devastating. I've been in this position before.
What do you see?
With a World Breaker. World Breaker is just one of the worst cards to have when your opponent's taking your turn for you. If it's in your hand, they're going to cast it and kill your best non-creature permanent.
Right.
If it's in your graveyard, they can just start sacrificing your lands.
Oh, no.
Thankfully, Steve only has one source of colorless mana, so at worst, Michael could only sacrifice one land to the ability to return World Breaker to the hand. And Steve decides maybe it's going to do the least amount of damage just by putting it in his hand.
But, what a terrible position for Steve Rubin. And it's just up to Michael Snyder to successfully navigate this extra turn and make sure that Rubin is at a complete disadvantage by the end of it. Interesting, Emrakul was the draw. He already had one in his hand.
Yeah. As bad as this turn is going to be for Steve, I think this game might continue and might get weird. Because
all right, I'm into it.
Steve's got a lot of mana, and he's got Emrakul in his own hand. So
let's get weird.
It's likely that both players are going to wind up Emrakuling one another. One of Michael's priorities here should be cutting Steve's mana as much as possible to maybe buy time before Steve can cast his own Emrakul. So, I mean, he can naturally kill off the Servant of the Conduit either by attacking into his own creatures, maybe using Chandra's -3, whatever it might be. He can World Breaker a land.
Or a Chandra.
Yeah, I think I actually may have misspoken a second ago. I'm not sure that World Breaker can kill Planeswalkers. I think it might be Artifact or...
It's when you cast World Breaker, exile target artifact, enchantment, or land.
Okay, so no Planeswalker.
Yeah. So no Planeswalker.
And then Steve's hand also features Aetherworks Marvel. That's a possible threat he's going to have to contend with.
Michael's setting up potential attacks. Is he trying to get extra energy here as well?
Yeah, he also is probably trying to combo both a little bit of combat damage with a Chandra -3 to finish off the smaller of the Tireless Trackers.
Yeah, that's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to do that. So Tireless Tracker dies. Everything dies. No more creatures for Steve Rubin. And Mike Snyder does end up losing a Servant of the Conduit in that exchange, but he even gets some extra energy thanks to the Aetherworks Marvel.
Okay, and he's going to World Breaker a land, perhaps.
Okay.
And he should make sure to spend an energy with the hub.
Yeah, this is a pretty brutal Emrakul turn here, even from Snyder's standpoint, just trying to work his way through what the most important things are.
Something like 15 power worth of creatures gone, 2 sources of mana gone, 3 loyalty off the Chandra gone, exiling the island. So now when Steve starts his turn, I think his best bet is just to play his own Emrakul. I don't have a accurate count on his graveyard, but it seems likely that with the 2 extra mana off Chandra, he'll be able to do so. He also could play it a little slower, more fair. Plussing Chandra, revealing a card, will be able to kill off the Nissel Vital Force if that's what he chooses to do. But I think priority should be Emrakul. So we see creature, enchantment, sorcery, land, instant. That's at least 5, so that's enough already.
Okay. Right, so there's 2 mana from Chandra. Tap out for the rest, and there is Emrakul.
And one advantage Steve has now with his turn is he can attack the Emrakul into Emrakul and World Breaker and effectively trade Steve's World Breaker for Michael's Emrakul.
He can order the blockers.
Yep, he can order the blockers as he chooses.
Michael has an Emrakul in his hand too, so you said it was going to get weird, and this is definitely going to deliver. So just to recap here, we're in the quarterfinals in Denver. This is game 3. This is the last match going. Steve Rubin is now controlling Michael Snyder's turn after having his turn controlled. The turn after that, he casted Emrakul. And now Rubin has to work his way through to see what kind of damage he can do to Snyder's board.
These guys had to play some very good Magic to get here. Now this game is a contest of who can be the worst Magic player, who can do the most damage to themselves while controlling the opponent's turn.
Oh, man.
Another option Steve might want to consider is, so he can ignore the Emrakul. He can use Nissa's plus ability to send World Breaker and a land into 2 blockers.
Yep.
The World Breaker will go to the graveyard. Then he can use the trick that I was outlining a moment ago of pay 3 mana, sacrifice a land, return World Breaker to your hand. In response, do it again.
Ugh.
So eat 2 lands.
And there are 2 colorless mana sources, 2 ether hubs.
Yes. So this will prevent Michael from hard casting Emrakul again on his turn. Tricky thing is, there's still the Aetherworks Marvel in play.
Yes, that is the problem. Now, Steve, I'm assuming, is allowed to forget these triggers?
No, absolutely not.
He must remember?
You can't forget. You can't intentionally forget an optional trigger. That would be cheating.
That's cheating. Okay, so that means that Michael's energy count is going to be...
I said an optional trigger. You can't forget a mandatory trigger.
Okay.
You can't intentionally forget a trigger is what I meant to say.
But what's going to happen is then Michael's going to be garnering energy from like that transaction right there. He's at 4, and up we go. I mean, if Michael gets to untap on his next turn with an Aetherworks Marvel that's all ready to go...
Mm-hmm.
Might not be the worst for him, even if he is getting pretty well crushed.
But
he got to 6 this
right
turn.
Away. Wow, well played by Steve Rubin.
I didn't think he could get to 6 this turn, but he just did.
Oh my goodness! And now, will he play the Ulamog to decimate 2 more of Michael's permanents, or will he just say that one's safer on the bottom of the library?
I mean, the downside being, of course, that Michael gets an Ulamog. The upside being he gets to take out 2 problematic permanents. The question, of course, being, Steve, can you beat an Ulamog?
Man, what a game, Marshall.
This is just insane.
This is the one that we thought could have been stone cold over on Michael Snyder's turn 4 when he played and activated the Marvel. That was not to be. Things developed in a bizarre way, and now we have both players hard casting Emrakuls against one another.
You said things can get weird. They got weird.
Mm-hmm.
This is intense. And he's just going to say no. Nothing.
Yep.
Great stuff from Steve Rubin. Got just up to the 6 energy and then wiped out the energy pool to put Snyder back down to nothing. Now, we have to note, Snyder does have a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot there.
Yeah, so what Steve's been able to accomplish is that now Michaels has to play the rest of the game with his library, with the Marvel activations. He's not going to be able to hard cast the Eldrazi from his hands. However, Michael is in a convenient spot here because attune with the Aether, which he already had in his hand, plus Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot and the Marvel
6.
trigger is going to be 6, yeah. He has to have a forest to find is one small caveat, but that should be no problem.
Because if he doesn't, it won't resolve.
Because otherwise he would have to spend an energy off.
Oh, he's out of green mana, I see. What a weird game.
What a weird game.
All right, he found a forest. He did it. All right. So once again, we're in the same position where we get to see this Aetherworks Marvel take a spin. Now, the other interesting thing to note here is that was the last one was an Ulamog going on the bottom 6 cards of the library somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that was a shuffle thanks to the Aetherworks Marvel. So we got a fresh spin here.
Yeah, we could see that very same Ulamog.
Yeah. What a game. Okay, Zach, trigger, that thing right back up to 6. He was on 0 starting the turn.
Now, I wonder if there's any consideration to attacking with the Emrakul first, because...
If you hit another?
You don't want to legend rule yourself. That would not be great. But also, Steve Rubin could just take the damage. So that there's a lot of subtleties going on there as well.
But then that's 13 damage.
It is. But Steve's got his own Emrakul ready to crack back. Not sure which of these players wants to trade Emrakuls, which of these players wants to trade damage, and which of these players wants to do nothing. Those are all complicated questions.
Right. Thank goodness for us, Michael Snyder's the one that has to make this decision at the moment because there's a lot going on.
He also has the option to attack Chandra if that's what he decides is best.
Well, you can see he's certainly considering all of his options at the moment.
Only the one Ulamog left in his library. So if he does not trade off the Emrakuls here, that's really his best, his only truly devastating hit. But if he does hit it, he's going to win the game.
Looks like, oh, so close. He looks like he had decided to attack, and he's changed his mind. Okay, here's Aetherworks Marvel.
Oh. He also must be thinking, should I wait? Is there any value in doing it on Steve Rubin's turn?
All right, he's going to attack with Emrakul. And is Rubin just going to take it? No, he's going to block. So Emrakul's trade. And there is a lot riding on this spin of the Aetherworks Marvel. Let's see what he hits.
Ooh.
He did not hit an Eldrazi.
No Eldrazi.
Michael Snyder has missed on an Eldrazi here. He did hit a Chandra. There's a few other things, but not an Eldrazi. Steve Rubin's breath is absolutely held right now.
My breath is held right now.
No kidding.
This is almost too much for me.
I can't even believe Steve Rubin's getting another turn.
Okay, so he doesn't have the ability to kill off Steve's Planeswalker. And the World Breaker is representing a very dangerous attacker. The land that Nissa pluses on remains a creature until Michael's next turn, so he could block with that, or even better, block with Servant of the Conduit here.
Yeah, he used it just as a sort of mana ramp. It does untap the land as well.
Okay, and what's he going to do with Chandra?
Plus. Well, plus is not enough to get the other Chandra off the battlefield, though.
Nope. It is enough to protect his Planeswalkers, though, because if Chandra had remained at 3 loyalty, it could kill the Servant of the Conduit. We know that's no sweat for Steve since he has a backup Chandra in hand.
And things are getting pretty important as far as what do you have left?
Mm-hmm.
What is still going on in there? Also, what's your Delirium count and your land count? Because that has changed quite a bit. Delirium, a bunch of cards added to the graveyard, but also both players have lost lands in their opponent's Emrakul's turns on them.
Now, let me point out, Marshall, I've been, certainly not in this exact situation, because nobody's been in this exact situation, but I've been in high-pressure situations like this, games like this, and fatigue starts to become an issue. These guys have played Magic for a long time, several extremely in-depth turns in a row, all with the pressure of playing in the top 8 of a Grand Prix with all of our eyes watching them. It really takes a toll on you, and I'm impressed that these players have been able to hold it together for so long, but at a certain point I wonder if this fatigue is going to start showing.
Here's another Emrakul from Steve Rubin. Oh, man. This has to be it, right? This is where Steve Rubin can now just fully wreak havoc with Michael Snyder's board.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I know how. I'm just saying, come on. How can Michael survive another one of these turns?
So the key card in this turn is going to be the World Breaker, which
he just drew.
Which Michael/Steve can cast via Chandra's plus adding mana ability. So he can choose to either just get rid of the Aetherworks Marvel directly. That certainly would be some stress out of the way. He can also choose to continue cutting mana by exiling a land and, of course, choosing not to play the forest from hand. I think probably the best bet's just to get rid of the Marvel and try to fight through the Emrakul fair and square, but I think we're going to see... I don't think this is going to be the last Emrakul turn we see in this game.
This isn't it, is it? We're still going.
He can exile Marvel or a land. Then he can use Nissa to plus and attack a land into the Emrakul.
Okay, it's World Breaker on the stack. That's going to give a triggered ability as well. Looks like Steve's still deciding.
Okay, so there goes the Marvel. That Marvel that's done so much damage over the course of this game.
Yeah, that thing's been on the battlefield since turn 4.
Okay, and Nissa sends in a forest. I like Steve's careful sequencing here, making sure to get the Marvel off the table first so that Michael doesn't get any extra energy.
And he's going to have to settle for that, though. I will note here that Snyder's now down to 5 lands, even with that land drop. He's lost 3 of them to his own World Breakers.
He has as much as 8 mana here if he uses both Planeswalkers for mana. He can cast another Emrakul, and then his final really key advantage here is that he's got Chandra on 7 loyalty ready to ultimate. This game's so bizarre that I could see a Chandra emblem not even being a winning play, but I mean, it's certainly something to think about.
The emblem gives you the ability, whenever you cast a spell, the emblem does 5 damage.
Yep, it makes every spell a lava axe in addition to its other.
Or you can even hit creatures with it, too.
Yep, absolutely can.
And here we go, another Emrakul. I've lost count of how many Emrakul turns we've had. Is this the 4th time?
I think so, yeah. Each player's taken 2. And Marshall, answer me this. How have there been 4 13/13 trample creatures cast, and both players are still above 20?
I don't know. What is going on? This has just been the craziest sequence. You know what's crazy, Reed? The winner has to go play again. Like, they're going to collapse after this match, and then they're just going to be like, hey, we need you over here.
Yeah.
There's an eager opponent that just had a sandwich and a glass of water ready to battle. Unreal. Okay, so it looks like Michael wants to trade his World Breaker for the opposing Emrakul. Remember, World Breaker has reach, and of course, Michael controlling all aspects here, as you described earlier, Reed. He can decide how to order the blockers. So, of the 13 damage, 7 are going to kill the World Breaker, and then the rest will carry over to Emrakul. But of course, it's not enough to be lethal. Anything else from Michael Snyder?
So I think part of this turn wants to involve casting the second Chandra and Legend ruling. He'll also almost surely use the -3 of the new Chandra. Could just target the World Breaker, could play a Servant in the Conduit and kill it off. I think any way you look at it, though, Steve Rubin's going to have access to 6 energy next turn.
And an Aetherworks Marvel.
And an Aetherworks Marvel. Although he can waste 1 with Steve's Aether Hub.
Okay.
That's a good start. Down to 1 energy. Legend rule. And will he play out a Servant in the Conduit? I think you might as well play 1. Maybe not, actually. Maybe it's just best to -3 the Chandra and let it go.
Why? Just because it ties up Steve's mana? Or?
It ties up Steve's mana, yeah. The challenge for Steve on his turn is going to be putting the Marvel into play and finding a way to get 5 energy.
Right.
And he has
the
a limited amount
would
of
leave
mana.
him with 2 energy, even if it were to die.
Correct.
Okay. Well, this is a huge turn for Steve Rubin. Can he find enough mana and energy to get the Aetherworks Marvel down and activate it and hit?
So at the worst, he can start by casting the Marvel and then attack the World Breaker at one of Michael's Planeswalkers. That would leave Michael with the option to either to either take the damage off the Planeswalker, lose some loyalty, or to block with Emrakul, sending the World Breaker to the graveyard and offering one more energy. Okay, an option to cast another Chandra. He decides not to. He just wants to knock 2 loyalty off here.
Yeah, take the prospects of an emblem off the table, at least for the time being.
Again, good sequencing from Steve here. Oh, he actually found Ether Hub, so he has no problem at all getting the energy.
There we go.
I think I would have liked to see him. Never mind. Maybe it's not worth suicide attacking the World Breaker. It's too valuable as a 5/7 creature.
Okay, so here we go. We're back up to 6 for Steve Rubin, and he has an Aetherworks Marvel down. Does he do it now? We've seen players do it on the main phase for the most part, and he's going to go for it. Let's see what he hits.
Anything?
He hit an Emrakul. Just making sure there were 6, says Michael Snyder, but he hit another Emrakul.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Never seen anything like this.
This is just absurd. Look at Snyder pat his legs like, sure.
Marshall, in all my years in the booth, I have never seen a game like this. Or is that your line?
No, I'll let you have it. My God. This is just absurd at this point. Another Emrakul turn for these players to slog through.
Okay, so 6 loyalty counters on Nissa Vital Force is a very significant number. So Steve Rubin could choose to just cash it in. Okay, you have an emblem. I don't think the game's going to go long enough for that emblem to be very important. That's fine. One problem gone.
Okay.
He can attack the Emrakul into the 2 blockers, World Breaker and Emrakul, and use the same technique of ordering World Breaker first. Emrakul gone. Another problem down. Now he can choose to cast the Chandra, or he can use the rest of his mana on the World Breaker trick, sacrificing a couple extra lands.
Okay.
And I think this is going to be the key turn of the game. I think Steve will have finally worn Michael's resources down low enough that he'll be able to win the game. There's no Marvel left to contend with.
You'll forgive me if I don't believe you.
Already he's choosing a different line, not necessarily a bad one, but he still wants to be attacking the Nissa land.
Yeah, he tapped it and then untapped it with the ability, and it's a creature right now.
Yeah, I don't think this is the absolute best Steve could have done on this turn, but it's probably going to be good enough.
Not just good enough. Okay, so he's going to lose a land and an Emrakul. Oh, he's just going to straight... No, he is going to trade off his World Breaker.
Yeah, and what he did was he minus the Chandra to deal 4 damage to the forest, which makes Serving the Conduit enough.
Okay, so he is going to lose the forest plus the 2 lands that he sacrificed plus the Emrakul. He also is going to have a Chandra all the way down on 2 loyalty with the Nissa at 7. But remember, her ultimate isn't one of those game breakers.
No.
It's
It's a game breaker in a long, close game, but this is no longer a close game.
Steve Rubin has finally swung the pendulum far enough in his direction that it looks nearly impossible for Snyder to come back. He's now on only red mana outside of the Ether Hubs, which he does have some energy, and only 3 lands.
Yeah.
He can't possibly come back from this now.
So he can use Nissa's -3 ability to rebuy Aetherworks Marvel, but you make a good point that he's low enough on energy that it's a multi-step prospect to get back in the game. Although he may have drawn a Marvel.
He did. He totally did. He could cast it.
He could cast it. He could then use the Nissa to regrow Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, but he's
to try
1
to set
mana
up for
short.
next turn, but yeah,
he's 1 mana short, even with his Chandra adding 2 loyalty.
2 mana next turn. Yeah. I'll tell you what I learned here, Reed. Emrakul's a liar.
Not the promised end.
She promised the end, and she did not deliver. 5 Emrakuls.
5 Emrakuls.
And somehow It took the 5th one, and the game's still not over yet. Though it does feel like it's much closer than it had been in any previous turn. Yeah, so he's taking your line there, Reed, regrowing the puzzle knot to try to set up for the Aetherworks Marvel next turn.
He still needs to find one more energy somewhere, but I suppose if a Planeswalker bites the dust, that's going to produce an energy.
Yeah.
And we finally get to the point where life totals are going to start getting attacked. Steve Rubin has on the board can deal 17 damage here, which not going to kill Michael, but can get close, can get in range.
Right. God, this has been a fun game to cover.
It's been great.
Looks like another World Breaker off the top for Rubin. He may be able to just cinch this thing up by killing the Marvel here, huh? Does he have a mana for it?
Mm-hmm.
5 plus Chandra, yeah?
Yeah, Steve is still going to be extremely careful despite how good his position looks here. He's worked too hard in this game to let a silly mistake let it slip away from him. And yeah, goodbye Marvel means that he is now free to attack the Planeswalkers, leave Michael with nothing but 3 lands on the battlefield.
Right, and that has to be the nails in the coffin for Snyder, who has been fighting and fighting and fighting. But yeah, turns out getting back your World Breaker is pretty strong here for Rubin. He got it back from his yard, cast it, and took out the most problematic permanent on the other side, which is somehow not one of the 2 Planeswalkers, but instead the Aetherworks Marvel. And now he gets to further lower the loyalty, wow, that's a tough one, of one of these Planeswalkers. He's also going to use Emrakul. Instead of attacking life totals, he is going to just crush the resources of Michael Snyder.
Is this going to be a concession?
I think we are finally there. How can he possibly come back from this? There just can't be any way. Why give up now, Michael? I'm with you, man. You came this far.
Yeah, he can gain some life and some energy if he has, if he can survive the turn. He could just draw another Marvel. I think never giving up has been a bit of a theme in this Grand Prix so far, especially factoring in Seth Manfield's win-in match against Corey Burkhart. Mm-hmm. It looked almost equally as bad as this, and you never, ever know what can happen.
Right. But I really like how Rubin is being very careful. He's being very patient. He knows that if he deals with all these problematic permanents, that cleaning up the mess as far as life totals goes, that's academic.
Yeah, he can do that at his convenience.
That's right. Where if he gets a little impatient and just says, okay, I'm going to try to kill you in 2 returns, you know, the little door opens up, and you don't want to do that. Especially with decks on this power level, right? The fact that you could draw a 4-mana spell that you can parlay immediately into a spell that costs 13, over 10 mana. This means you just don't want to do that. All right, now Rubin has finally whittled down Michael Snyder to only lands and energy left.
Yeah, Steve could have used the attune to help him get to 6 energy, but I think he's just saying, I don't want randomness to be any part of this game anymore. I want to do the guaranteed effect of getting your Chandra off the table. I can use clues to get the last couple energy if I want that, but you know, I'm not going to put my stock in Aetherworks Marvel hitting something important.
And may as well cast the Tireless Tracker. There's not much that can go wrong. And in the meantime, take 20. And this should be the last draw step here for Michael Snyder. He fought hard, but it wasn't to be. And Steve Rubin advances to the semifinals, and he absolutely has to be exhausted. That is going to do it for our quarterfinals here from Denver. Stay tuned. We'll have the semifinals up for you next.